Chapter 8, The Ineffable Current of Bliss, August 27. At this very moment, I am again within the current which also is myself. Speaking from the standpoint of the individual consciousness, I shall write of it as much as I can convey in words. I had been doing a little manual work and at the moment was stooping and looking at some gravel that had been carried from a distant valley. While doing so, I sank into a brooding state and seemed to retreat to a distance where there was a profound, palpable, and pregnant silence. I attended to this as to a voice and received the value of a communion. There were no words, no ideas, not any other form. Yet one might say it was the very essence of sound or meaning. It was utterly satisfactory and feeling. It was the very power that makes all things to become clear. Again there flowed the current of gentle joy that penetrates through and through. I shall attempt an analysis of this current of joy as it affects the outer consciousness, including the psychological man. To the sensuous consciousness it appears as of the nature of a fluid, for there is a sense of flowing through. It penetrates all tensions with the effect of a physical release. Spots that are not so well feel both rested and stronger. All over and through there is a quality that may well be described as psychological happiness. The organism feels no craving for sensuous distraction in order to find enjoyment. The external life of the individual could appear highly ascetic and austere to others, but all the while it would be profoundly happy. The fact is that the real chaise is anything but ascetic, however much he may appear to be so to the sensual man. For example, from the standpoint of a young animal, a man who sits quietly for 2 hours listening to a concert given by a virtuoso might well seem to be submitting himself to a rigorous discipline of ascetic self-control. But the man himself, provided that he was a real lover of music, would flatly deny that such was the case. He would claim that he was keenly enjoying himself and doing just what he would prefer to do. Likewise, the sage in his withdrawn life is not imposing hardship upon himself. Actually, he faces more hardship moving in the public places, administering large affairs, attending the ordinary amusements of men, etc. For in all this there is a distraction that makes the deeper enjoyment difficult, and for many practically impossible. It is entirely natural for men to prefer gold to base metal, and he who has realized the spiritual gold enjoys more, not less. I wish by every means possible to make the point clear that in the current lies the highest possible value from the relative standpoint we can call enjoyment. In principle, there is no need of denying any phase of external action, save as a temporary discipline, so that the necessary inward concentration may be effected. The man who has made the ineffable transition is free. Outwardly, he lives the life that he chooses, but it is utterly foreign to his innermost nature to choose evil. Just as the man who is naturally cleanly has to impose no restraint upon himself to prevent himself from jumping into a mud puddle to wallow with the hogs, so the realized man is not tempted by evil. Evil is foreign to his real nature, and there is no question of an effort to make himself good. Footnote: I am not forgetting what the East Indians have said about the transcendence of enjoyment. They are correct in the sense in which they use the term, but at the present moment I am not speaking to the metaphysician. I am addressing myself to consciousness polarized to the objective. End of footnote. This places him in a position where he can, if necessary, work with the instruments of evil and do no evil. Life in the current of joy is not the special prerogative of a small handful of men and women in the world. There are many living who now could realize themselves as one with this current, and ultimately all can do so in some day of time. Actually, the transition is not so difficult, yet a lot of hard work has been put forth in the wrong direction through defining the source in terms of complexity. It is as simple as running from an object of to the subject to, all relative consciousness plus the spontaneity of the self. Probably the most important difficulty which has made recognition a rare event is a characteristic in our type of consciousness. The focus is placed upon the objective content of knowledge. Development in this sense involves an ever greater and greater growth in complexity. Hence, when man learns of transcendental consciousness and he seeks to realize this, his effort rather naturally is in direction of more complex ideology. The greater the intellectual evolution of an individual, the more likely is this to be the case. And this explains why it is so often just the able men who have most difficulty in effecting the transition. Now, the effective focusing of consciousness is precisely in the diametrically opposite direction. It is toward the subjective moment in the subject-object manifold. This possesses the simplicity of the point. It is easily overlooked just because of its extreme simplicity. Yet it remains true, and if the able man can succeed in fighting this, he can reap a richer harvest, both for himself individually and for others. That is true in the case of those of inferior ability.